As I mentioned in my newsletter article a few days ago, the season of Advent for Unitarian Universalists might hold great meaning for those of us for whom the Christian tradition remains of prime religious significance. But because so many of us now find a core of meaning in other traditions, Advent has slipped in importance. Even Christmas has more secular than sacred importance. So, why should we craft our December services around the Sundays of Advent? I think that there are at least two answers. First, both Unitarian and Universalist traditions are rooted in the Christian tradition. And it's important, I think, to know our roots as well as our development. Second, the qualities celebrated over the 4 Sundays of Advent are qualities we all find important, whether or not we connect them to the historical Jesus or the theological Christ. Hope, love, joy, and peace. Hope, in the words of Emily Dickinson, is the thing with feathers that perches on the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And perhaps that's all we need know of hope. The thing with feathers is light, it is fragile, it is quick, it is fearful, it is inquisitive. It looks forward to the future in ever-increasing anticipation. Words complicate hope. Hope is the tune, the never-ending song. As long as there is hope, there is life. And as long as there is life, there is hope. The kind of hope celebrated by Christians is a bit different, though. And we can't refer to just one Christian tradition when we talk about the spirit of hope that is celebrated in Advent. In some traditions, it is straightforward. The coming of Christ refers to the physical nativity in Bethlehem, that which is celebrated on Christmas Day. In some traditions, hope refers to the reception of Christ in the heart of the believer, the heart that believes in the transformation of the world through hope, love, and charity. In yet other traditions, the Roman Catholic in particular, the hope referred to is the hope for the second coming of Christ to redeem the broken world. For each of us, hope holds its own idiosyncratic meaning. How does hope figure in your life, in the way you approach the world each day? Hope was celebrated in the first Sunday of Advent last week. A Sunday dedicated to celebrating music is always an occasion for hope, don't you think? The word Advent comes from the Latin adventus, which means coming or arrival. The arrival of Christmas was so impatiently waited by German children in the 19th century that a Lutheran pastor, Johann Heinrich Wiechern, who worked with poor urban children, in 1839 created the modern Advent wreath, a ring of wood with 19 small red tapers and 4 large white candles. Every morning, a small candle was lit, and every Sunday, a large one. Over time, we've lost the tradition of the daily red candles, but the weekly candles remain. The second candle of Advent represents love. The central message of the New Testament, as understood by the churches in the South that surrounded me when I was living in Bowling Green, Kentucky, is from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. You've seen the reference everywhere, no doubt, on plaques, in stores selling everything from religious items to candles, to home decor, to sundries. You've even seen it at football games, if you watch football games, on signs held up as the place kicker lines up for the field goal or extra point. The emphasis, to my great annoyance, I must admit, is on individual salvation rather than following in the steps of Christ in his actions here on earth, achieving liberation through loving action. But today's sermon is not devoted to scriptural exegesis. Today, I want to talk with you about what love means in your life, where it lives, and how it is made manifest. I love chocolate. I love scary movies. I love football. I love modern dance. I love the smell of fresh cut grass. When I was a kid attending Sunday school classes, CCD, under the auspices of the Catholic Church, we were taught that all of these were improper uses of the word love, which should be reserved for something transcendent, something spiritual, something refined, something eternal. We could like all those things I listed. In fact, we could like them very much, but we were not supposed to love them. I think there was something idolatrous about that, putting love for the carnal pleasures of the world above love for the only object worthy of love, our Lord in heaven. Though I guess we were allowed to love people too, our fathers and mothers, our spouses, our relatives, even our neighbors, who we were to love as ourselves. It was things we were not allowed to love. And I understand the impulse behind that kind of teaching, and I do think we need to separate our love for things from our love for people. But even more, I think we have to get out of this habit of black and white, either or thinking, where because we love one thing, we can't love another. We need to understand that in love, as in so many other things, there is complexity. The word love is flexible enough that it can have many uses. We know that when we say we love chocolate, we mean that we enjoy the experience of it enough that the word love seems appropriate. It's an expression of enthusiasm. We are not suggesting making a sacrament out of it. Though come to think of it, loving chocolate is fine, or draft beer, or Kentucky bourbon, or the Boston Celtics. But such love does not sustain us. And there is danger, really a kind of idolatry, when we feel deprived of love, of nourishment, of love from family, friend, lover, pastor, mentor, guide. And we turn to food, or alcohol, or drugs to fill the gap, to assuage the ache of emptiness. And then we have slipped into a dangerous place. To call it idolatry is to slap a moral quality onto it. Is it a moral failing, or just a human need for something deep and lasting, going unfulfilled, with something to fill the immediate need, used to fill the gap, soothe the emptiness, quell the fear? Love is the opposite of hate, we learned early in life. And then, as we grew older, we were asked to consider that love, was it not, after all, the opposite of fear? Fear is not so very far from the sense of loss and loneliness that some of us feel when the season of Christmas joy rolls around each year. An absence where we feel a fullness should be. Do we expect too much? Are we led to expect too much by the ads, the Christmas movies, the unceasingly upbeat music of a holly jolly Christmas? Christmas does indeed bring joy to many. I hope all our children still feel the excitement and joy that Christmas promises. And I hope our giving tree brings joy to those who would otherwise go without. But I'm well aware that for many, loneliness and emptiness take the place of joy in the holiday season, even here among us. Thanksgiving was hard for some here with no family to share it. There have been conversations about coming together as a church next year to host a dinner for all those who love a sense of community during this holiday time. And even talk of a group getting together here on Christmas Day this year. Is that something we should pursue? If you're interested, please speak to me after the service. The kind of love that we show one another in a community such as this, the kind of love that seeks companionship, may be what the ancient Greeks referred to as philia, affectionate regard, friendship, usually between equals. A dispassionate, virtuous love, as Aristotle called him. It's been thought of as loyalty to friends, brotherly love, loyalty to family and community. Philia, what does it require? Familiarity, equality, and that concept which seems to have faded into quaintness, virtue. Enjoying an activity together, whether a meal, a musical performance, or a worship service, generates and embodies philia. When we say we love our church, we are speaking from a place, a feeling of philia. It's useful, I think, to understand love as having different dimensions. It helps us make sense out of relationships that we know are important, but we can't quite figure out why. And it helps us understand when one type of love shifts, bumps into, and is transformed into another. Agape is another form of love, according to the Greeks. Similar in some ways to philia, because some people say it refers to brotherly love as well. But it can also refer to the love of a person for whom or what they conceive of as God, and for the love that God has traditionally understood to have, has traditionally been understood to have for his creatures. Thomas Aquinas explained it as to will the good for another. You may not like someone, but if you can wish them well as they try to find their own way to find meaning and purpose in their lives, you can love them in the spirit of agape. Christians who believe that God unconditionally loves his children are speaking of agape when they talk about this kind of love. I think the man known as the Good Samaritan in today's story was expressing agape when he felt compelled to help a stranger badly hurt lying by the side of the road. And did you notice how easy it was for the priest and the Levite to find excuses not to help? Excuses bound up in codes, roles, rituals, and institutionalized morality. Have you experienced agape in your life? Have you experienced a love which can accept all things? Or is it too much to ask? If you expect it to be the storge type of love, the love the Greeks describe as a love of parents for children, I think you'd be setting yourself a bar too high to cross. This is not a dispassionate love, but a kind of natural empathy, a love that includes affection, a feeling of warmth and attachment. If you're thinking of love for your country or even for the local sports team, there's affection involved, the love called storge. Here, the passions begin to be involved. Passions at sporting events can give rise pretty quickly to emotions that don't look too much like love. And this can happen in families too, as I'm sure you know. There are a few of us who have not experienced stormy storge episodes. But this kind of love we more often associate with the warmth experienced in the living room beside the Christmas tree in the presence of well-meaning family members on Christmas morning. At around this point of sermon writing yesterday, I took a break, and while walking from the kitchen to the bedroom, saw Miss Runyon, my tabby of indeterminate age but sweet disposition, lying asleep on the top of the sofa, her head bent down, sunk into the cushion, her limbs all leaning towards me, her tail lying flat behind her, everything completely still, open, vulnerable, trusting. It was this kind of storge love that rose up in me, warm and satisfying. The type of love we seem to think of most often, the kind of love promoted and exploited, I'm sorry to say, in our society, the love glorified in movies, from romantic comedies to salacious melodramas, is a love called eros, the love of sexual passion. The modern Greek word erota means passion, though Plato had something else in mind when he used the word eros, well, something somewhat different. He was referring to intimate love, which of course includes love born of the passions. In Plato's conception, though, although eros is initially felt for a person, with contemplation it becomes an appreciation of beauty within that person, and eventually even appreciation of beauty itself. So Wikipedia tells me, and I have no reason to disbelieve. This is where the concept of Platonic love comes from. Interesting that it starts with the passions, but doesn't end there. When we think of eros today, though, we think of the sensual, the physically intimate, the erotic. We would be fooling ourselves, though, if we thought that relationships that are based solely on sexual arousal and fulfillment have anything to do with love. There is, sadly, such a thing as exploitation of others for one's own gratification. The movie She Said, in current release, reminds us of this only too vividly. Sexual intimacy may be an aspect of erotic love, but it is not its sole quality. Philotia is a kind of love that is potentially problematic. Philotia is self-love. There is no question that loving ourselves is essential for our happiness. Sometimes the critiques and criticisms we receive as children, if delivered too frequently or with too much vehemence, make self-love difficult for some people. Habits of self-doubt and self-criticism get in the way. At the other end of the spectrum is too much self-love, narcissism, insisting that one's own preferences be held paramount, that one be praised for fairly ordinary accomplishments, that one be thought of as special in a way that sometimes includes demeaning others and diminishing their accomplishments. Nothing very loving in that. One needs enough self-love to advocate for oneself, to have self-regard, even to seek advantages if they do not significantly disadvantage others. A balancing act, to be sure. But self-love is necessary if it comes in the form of self-respect and even a sense of affection for the self. The last form of love I'll speak of today is what the Greeks call xenia, guest friendship or hospitality. The way we welcome newcomers to our church service on a Sunday morning is a form of xenia. There may be a kind of ritualized quality to it, but if it is not authentically warm, people notice and remember. On the several occasions on which friends of mine have attended services here, they've later told me how much they appreciated the warmth of the welcome. At the same time, cottage meetings have revealed that newcomers at coffee hour often receive a quick, warm greeting, but old-timers then tend to gravitate toward long-term friendships and leave the newcomers standing awkwardly at the edge of things. I think we can do better at xenia, welcoming the guest, if we keep this in mind, remembering occasions when we ourselves were in the newcomer's row. Xenia, philia, agape, storge, eros, philotia. With so many varieties of love available to us, surely in this season of love we can find in both our hearts and minds a suitable way to show love to the friend, the neighbor, the lover, the stranger, even the adversary, even the self, even little old you, even little old me. One of my favorite quotes on this subject is from the 1st century BCE Jewish leader, Rabbi Hillel the Elder. And I'll close with it now. If I am not for myself, who will be for me? And if I am only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, when?